Budget basics for absolute beginners. Beat the budgeting blues easily with these tips. Everybody knows the importance of keeping a budget, but in reality, only a few people do so systematically. We give you here tips that can help you create, modify, and stick to a budget. Our ultimate goal is to help you maximize savings, control spending, and increase revenue to ensure long-term financial security. Welcome back, folks, to another edition of Sweetie Kiwi. I'm very happy to have you with me today. I hope you are doing fantastic, and I'm doing wonderful. And if you are doing as great as I am, go grab a cup of coffee or tea or vodka and let's roll. Today we really want to talk about money management, budgeting for absolute beginners. Now, if you have some experience and you have some experience in terms of managing your cash, this conversation could also be helpful for you because, everybody needs to always learn something, right? Before I quickly get into nitty-gritty, let me give a quick shout out to Len McKnight in Clover, Virginia, Cole Huffman in Arlington, Virginia, and Romeo Galloway in Blacksburg, Virginia. All right, thank you so much for all our lawyers, fans and listeners. We really appreciate it. Number one, know what you spend versus what you earn. Here, the conversation is about income versus expenses, right? It's very important. If you're new to budgeting, you have to understand the both sides of the budgeting equation here. You got to know how much you're making. You have to have a clear idea of how much money you're pulling in every month. This is very important versus how much you're spending. The mistake that millions of Americans make on a daily basis is trying to have a budget. If they're courageous enough, trying to have a budget without even having a clear idea of how much they're pulling every month or how much they're spending. They may have an idea of how much they're making, but when it comes to expenditures, the jury's still out. Now, today you have a lot of electronic tools that can help you track your expenses, right? You can use your debit card statements, your bank account statements, your credit card statements. You can even use you have spending apps that allow you from your phone to identify and track your expenses. So this is very important. Now, we all know the primary reason why we talk about budgeting, right? Because budgets have one quintessential goal, and that is to help you live within your means on a month-to-month basis, right? You got to think of budgeting this way. If you spend more than you earn, you will end up in debt, right? Or you have to dip into your savings. Either way, you're getting financially poorer. You're getting poorer. Your financial situation is deteriorating, right? So it is very important to track your expenses and know how much you're spending. Now, you want to spend less than your income and you get to save money. Now, this is a no-brainer, but believe me, it is harder to do in reality. It's hard. It's easier said than done. Everybody understands you have to spend less than your income, but people still do it because you have the plastic, you have a credit card, or you have savings, and down the road they start having problems, right? So one of the things you want to do here is you want to create an emergency fund. I'm not talking about your typical savings account. You need to create a rainy day fund, right? And you can actually put a few months of saving together, and this would allow you to have a double layer of security, right? And this is very important in case you end up with an unforeseen event. There was an accident, somebody's sick, or there was a wedding, all kinds of stuff. Life is very, very, it's full of surprises, sometimes good, sometimes bad. So the first element you have to think about is you have to know what you spend versus what you earn. I'll be right back right after this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, folks, to another edition of Sweetie Kiwi. We're still continuing our conversation. Number 2, create a zero-based budget plan. Before I talk about zero-based budget plan, let me quickly give a shout out to Wesley Roth in Worcester in the UK, Cameron McKee, Worcester in the UK, and Geraldine Salinas, also in the beautiful city of Worcester in the UK. If you love this show so far, please consider subscribing and turning on the notification bell. Share, like, comment below. We really appreciate it. What do I mean by zero-based budgeting? Now, zero-based plan is very important because the idea here is to have $0 left over. In other words, if your zero-based budget plan calls for, total amount of $500, it means that, you're already spending $500. If during the month you hit $500, that means that you're putting a lot of expenses on hold for the next month. All right. The thing here is, yes, a zero-based budget plan is more radical, but it's very effective because it helps you get closer to your ultimate goal, which is reaching your financial goals, right? And the thing here is that by having a clear idea of your income versus your expenses, you can very clearly say, okay, this is an example, I'm making $5,000 a month, right? Or let's just say I'm making $2,000 net after taxes. I'm making $2,000 net a month. Let's try to be a little prosperous here. $5,000 net. I'm making $5,000 net, and all my expenses amount to $2,500. So 50% of my income, of my disposable income, goes to expenses. So if I establish a zero-based budget plan, that means that all my expenses are hitting $2,500. When that amount is hit, I don't do anything else. I don't spend any money for that particular month. Now it requires some kind of flexibility in practice, but it is doable. You get the idea. This is the whole idea here. And the way you do this is that when you get your cash, if you're paid every 2 weeks or every month or every week, what you're doing is you basically put cash for what I call mandatory expenses, right? Because you have mandatory expenses and discretionary expenses, right? So mandatory expenses are those costs that you cannot live without. You have to eat, so groceries, food. You have to pay your rent or mortgage, so the money's going out. You have to buy some clothing. You have to take care of utilities. Those are mandatory. And then you have discretionary expenses. You have traveling, leisure, going to movies, all that kind of stuff. So you create a zero-based budget plan to focus primarily on mandatory expenses. Now, if you have to spend more than the budget of the month, what you want to do is you need to evaluate the importance of that expense for that particular month. Let's say something happens and you need to spend money. You got to ask yourself, is this justifiable? Do I need to spend this money this month? Can you wait? How important it is? How relevant it is? Right? So you want to determine which activities and which costs should rank high and which should rank low. And once you do that, that's the kind of thinking that and by the way, zero-based budgeting is something that companies also do. So it's not just for individuals. Companies also have this approach. So the idea here is to set a certain amount, and beyond that amount, make sure you have a rigid review process that says yay or no, yay or nay, or yes or no. So to go back to the earlier example, if you want to spend, let's say in the current month your expenses go to $2,600 or $2,700, that extra $200 must be justified. You need to be very, very clear about why you need to spend that money in that particular month, right? Now, if you are married or you are in a relationship, this kind of budgeting discussions must be held with your partner, right? It's very important to make those decisions jointly, because when it comes to money management, you can't do on your own if you don't live by yourself. All right, I'll be right back right after this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, folks, to another edition of Sweetie Kiwi. We're still having a conversation here about budgeting for absolute beginners, and we're trying to help you beat the budgeting blues with very easy tips. Okay, tip number 3: make savings come first. This is very important. Before I even delve into this topic, let me again give a shout out to Hugo Cheney from Toowoomba. This is in the beautiful country of Australia. Beautiful Australia. Tessa Barry from Toowoomba, Australia. And Clem Valenzuela, also in Toowoomba, Australia. I've never been to Toowoomba, but the name sounds nice to me already. Thank you, Hugo, Clem, and Tessa. Now, make savings come first. Now, there is a rule of 50, 30, 20. Now, there is another rule called 50, 20, 30 by Elizabeth Warren. We like at the Sweetie Kiwi Show, we like the 50, 30, 20 rule better, and I'll explain why. And actually, when we say 50, 20, 30, we like to start with 20. In other words, you want to make your savings come first. 50% of your salary, of your disposable income, goes to mandatory expenses. 30% go to discretionary expenses. Those are optional. And 20% goes to your income. Now, the reason why we like to twist things around is that we like to start with paying yourself first. So when you get your paycheck, the first thing you got to do is 20% without even thinking about it. That 20 grand just goes into the savings. And the best way to do this is by automating it. So you just have an automatic, you have an automatic transfer. You know, if you have, it's better to have two accounts. So you have an automatic transfer that gets executed every month or every 2 weeks, or, whenever you're paid, that gets executed by transferring cash from your checking account into your savings account. Another way of even doing it better is to have a direct deposit, so that you set up the direct deposit plan so that the company, your employer, pays your savings account ASAP. So you don't even see that money, right? So making the savings a priority may sound difficult, but it is very important. As a matter of fact, we recommend, experts actually recommend, that you put savings as an expense item on your budget. That will force you to look at it as an expense. That will force you to put it in your zero-based budgeting. All right. Another thing that you want to do also is that you can have several layers of what we call savings, right? You can have a regular savings account. You can have an emergency savings account. That's what some experts call emergency fund or rainy day account. You can also have a savings account for extra activities. For instance, you can actually put some. You can have an account that is dedicated for things like vacations, graduation, children's graduations. You can also have a college fund, right? In the extra activities savings account, you can even save some cash for the purchase of a car, right? It's just up to you. The thing is, it definitely depends on your lifestyle, what you like, the kind of stuff, the kind of goals you have. All right. Now remember though, that so far I've been talking about savings accounts that are non-compensated. They're not compensated. Now you can also open savings accounts that pay you some interest. You have money market accounts and CDs, certificate of deposits. The only problem is right now in this environment, this particular rate environment, rates are very low. Like, you put in your cash somewhere, like in a CD, the bank wants to freeze that money for 6 months or 1 year, but they're only paying you 0.001%. I mean, I'm exaggerating here, but they're probably paying you 0.5%. But the money is sitting there and you can't move it. And I just feel it's a little unfair, because God forbid something happens to you and you need to have access to the cash. If you sort of breach the CD agreement by stopping the CD from going into its maturity, the bank will charge you some penalty. So you're actually paying the bank. You're actually being penalized for giving the bank your money. So long story short, I just wanted to say that it is a possibility you might want to consider if you want to diversify your holdings. All right, I'll be right back right after this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, folks, to another edition of Sweetie Kiwi. We're still talking about budget basics for absolute beginners, and I want to quickly give a shout out to Krishina Shijeko. This person is in Tokyo, Japan, of course. We have Sakata Michiru in Tokyo and Machuo Hyosuke also in Tokyo. Thank you so much for listening to us all the way from Japan. We want to thank our Japanese and in general Asian listeners and fans. We really appreciate your help. Thank you so much. And for those who are listening to us right now, if you want your name to be acknowledged on air, consider subscribing to our channel and turn on the notification bell. Share, like, and comment below, and we will acknowledge you. Number 4, understand a budget is a means to reach an end. It's very important, right? A budget is not a static table, is not a static report in itself. It is a means to help you reach an end. And the end here being financial security, financial stability. So be flexible, right? There is not a one-size-fits-all budget, right? Each person and family is unique, right? So your budget should equally be unique. All right. So as you get into putting a a little spreadsheet where you indicate your income and expenses, make sure you're flexible and adapt to change, right? Your budget isn't going to be perfect the first time around or the second time around or the third time around, right? But adapt to change. One of the things you want to be very careful about is things like unexpected expenses and emergencies, right? Those things occur to all of us, right? And more frequently than we'd like. So try to be realistic with your expectations, all right? So as change happens to your budget, try to adapt them, all right? The thing is, even though you're flexible, please hold your zero-based budget. Be a little stringent, be disciplined. This is how you can gradually start seeing the results in the short term or the medium term. All right. Now, when I'm talking about flexible, what is a flexible budget? Now, a flexible budget adjusts to changes in actual revenue levels. What I'm trying to say here is that if you start your budget while making $5,000 a month, when you start making $7,000 or $8,000 a month, you can change your budget accordingly, right? Because the thing here is that you are generating a budget that is specific to the input. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that the best way to do this is just to create an Excel spreadsheet and basically put all expenses as a percentage of your income. Let me repeat that. The easier way to create a flexible budget is to have a budget in Excel. So you have on one end you have on one side you have income, on the other side you have expenses, but you actually make all expenses. You set all expenses as a percentage of your disposable income. That way, as your expenses change, as your income rather changes, your expenses can also move accordingly. Let me give you an example. Let's say you are making $5,000 and you set your rent to be, say, 10% of your income. Utilities should be, 2%. Traveling should be 3%, right? Now, as your income changes, if your income moves from $5,000 to $7,000 a month, of course, your rent is not going to change, so that you will keep fixed. Utilities hopefully will not change either. So you keep those percentages fixed. You keep those amount fixed. Where you would have to manage things a little bit is traveling, for instance. You start making good money. You want to go to nice places. You want to go more to the movies. You want to dine out with your significant other, right? So things like dining out, traveling, those can be set, those expenses can be set as a percentage of your income. All right? I will be right back right after this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, folks, to another edition of Sweetie Kiwi. I'm still here, and we are about to wrap up today's conversation. And for those who just joined us, what is the context of today's conversation? In this show, I was giving you the budget basics for absolute beginners, how to beat the budgeting blues, with some 5 tips, actually 4 tips that I gave you, right? Now, everybody knows the importance of keeping a budget, but in reality, only a few people do so systematically. I've given you here Tips that can help you create, modify, and stick to a budget. Right? The ultimate goal of this show is to help you maximize savings, control spending, and increase revenue to ensure long-term financial security. Now, here is a recap of today's show. Know what you spend versus what you earn. Create a zero-based budget plan. Make savings come first. Understand a budget is a means to reach an end. I want to take the opportunity to acknowledge Jules Morais in Edmundston in the beautiful Canadian province of New Brunswick, Valerie Supernat in Bathurst in Brunswick, Canada, and Mason Scott in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada. So Jules, Valerie, and Mason, all from the beautiful Canadian province of New Brunswick. We thank you. We love you. Here is today's call to action, right? I just want to say that one thing that's very important when it comes to budgeting is to use online tools. You can use software, free apps, whatever it is, use, but make it very simple. What you want to do is automate everything so that you don't have to constantly use your emotions or whatever. No, you want to automate everything, right? And nowadays there are apps that are even more sophisticated. Unfortunately, they're not free, but the cost is worth it. And those apps use artificial intelligence. So you have an AI empowered app that helps you manage your money. Maybe it's worth it, maybe it's not worth it. It's up to you. So use online tools, but also track spending on a weekly basis. Because the thing is, if you wait for a whole month or 2 months or a quarter and you're not used to budgeting, you might be off the wrong track. So you want to start by tracking your expenses on a weekly basis and do this for a month or two and see how you feel. All right? Thanks for listening, and I will see you next time. Remember, stay marvelous.